Hey guys, welcome back. It's Tasha,
And it's Amy.
and we're here to go to our part two of what's going to protect your kids. So, going from what we talked about last time
Yeah.
into a little bit deeper this time in regards to social emotional learning,
Mhm.
the gaming industry, and mental health. So, Amy, let's go ahead and get started.
So before we begin, we just wanted to let you know that we are frequenting.
Oh, yeah.
Frequenting.
Frequent. We are at.
Drew's in Elkader. We have tried to spread the love a little bit. We've done a little bit of home videoing, but we've also tried to go to Fennelly's, and now we're at Drew's tonight. So thank you to Drew's for graciously carving out a spot for us in the back for us to be able to go live. So
Yeah, so if you hear a little extra entertainment in the background, it's just live at the restaurant.
Yep,
So.
and I did hear Wheel of Fortune playing, so if you hear some clapping, it's not at us, it's actually at the game, Wheel of Fortune. So just let's clarify
Maybe
that.
it's about us, but I think it's Wheel of Fortune. So, all right, let's dig right in there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about those three areas.
So where do you want to begin? Which one?
I don't know. I think we should start with social emotional learning.
Okay.
And really just define what that is and what do we mean when we talk social emotional learning. So do you want to?
Yeah, you bet. Yep. So basically when we talk about the social emotional piece of a human being, whether it's the learning process or just who we are, it's really about children and adults acquiring.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, excuse me.
Acquiring,
and being able to apply knowledge and attitude, empathy, and all the other pieces that encompass basically having social skills and being caring about one another.
Okay, so things like you already described, empathy, being able to look at a situation and know how they can help. It's also about goal setting,
positive relationships
in and out of school.
Yep.
In a community, at home.
And social emotional learning is probably most critical and most valuable when kids are youngest. Not saying that we can't acquire these skills as we become older,
right.
But the most bang for our buck for sure is when they're little, when
right.
the brain is developing, and it's the most malleable around the social emotional part of the brain.
So doing work in social emotional learning or providing opportunities for kids to learn isn't just the sole responsibility of any one person in their world, though, right? I mean, aunts, uncles, friends, teachers, parents can all take advantage of opportunities that present themselves to talk with the children about making a good decision right now, what the consequence might be. I mean, my daughter just had a meltdown the other day. I didn't even get a chance to tell you this. Her sister offered her a piece of brownie for a Shopkin.
Like a trade?
Like a trade. So she traded and then had a meltdown.
She got the bad end of the deal.
Because that Shopkin she just got for her birthday the week before. Yep. So we had this long talk about thinking through the decision, thinking through the long-term consequences of what seems like a really good decision right now, and I really want this gold shiny thing right now. But in the long term, what are the consequences of that decision? And that's really small scale.
Yeah.
But it's those types of situations that can lead her to better thinking.
And partly, when we talk about the kids that aren't even in school yet, it's about modeling, it's about role-playing, that when you walked up and hit your brother or your sister, how do you think it made them feel? And I don't think oftentimes we spend enough time in that area because we just consequence our kids out by saying, you can't hit, why did you hit?
Right.
Well, a 4-year-old doesn't know why they hit. If they knew why they hit, they probably wouldn't have hit.
Right.
Because the benefit on the other side is not typically a positive reinforcer, right? It's a negative reinforcer. It's a timeout. It's whatever your consequence may be. So social emotional at that age looks exactly like what you're talking about with your girls. When it gets to the school age, it also can be curriculum that can be brought into the school. But I also think it's those opportunities to have the moments when two kids aren't getting along, teaching them conflict resolution.
Right.
Not everything is bullying today. And I think, too, when kids have problems at recess, I hear parents use the word bullying often. My child went to school and they had conflict at recess. They were bullied at recess. No, they really probably weren't bullied. They probably just had some conflict that we need to teach our kids how to appropriately play with one another, whether it's recess, whether it's at home in the backyard. We have a lot of helicopter parents, and we alluded to some of this during our generational differences. And when we have helicopter parents that go into rescue instead of teaching our kids or navigating it with our kids, so kids then end up talking back and forth, that becomes a barrier too to social emotional learning.
For sure. And having these opportunities and learning these skills young and all throughout our life, but learning them young can lead to a lot of really great benefits, like like better grades in school, better interactions in school, a stronger social network as you move through high school and then into college, and coping skills, and just this idea of being successful in school, in life, in your career, and just as a person.
Part of the other secondary benefit too, I know we kind of started talking about social emotional from the aspect of a sense of belonging,
right?
And we brought that up last time because we were coming off a lot of reactiveness from school shootings, and I'm fine with some reactiveness, but I think we need to be talking preventative, and I think that's a piece that we are absolutely missing.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking preventative, I lost my train of thought for the moment. So
sense of belonging.
Yeah, the sense of belonging. So it will come back to me. So
Sounds
keep
good.
going.
Okay. So I think you alluded to, in a school, it could be a full curriculum. It could be just simple lessons that a teacher
I know what
uses.
I was going to say. Stop, time out.
Okay.
Okay.
Add it.
DSM-5. So the Diagnostic Statistical Manual that talks about the disorders, when we look at anxiety in the DSM-5, it's large.
Right.
Okay. And what we are finding is that kids are lacking free play, and they're lacking conflict resolution skills. So some of these things all play into that social emotional piece.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we have kids that have high anxiety all the time, and I hear that word often, and I have a child that suffers with anxiety, and this is not a podcast about anxiety, and we'll do another one someday around that, because I feel like that could go on for a long time. But what do we need to do around the orders of free play, around adversity?
Yeah.
When we talked about that growth mindset earlier, sometimes people who haven't been challenged with a lot of adversity don't know how to handle it when it does happen.
Right.
So I think those are some of the other pieces that we need to do a better job of teaching our kids. Our kids don't know how to necessarily free play because they're very structured, which means that they go from school to sports. School is a lot more rigorous than it used to be. We don't have the recess time that we used to have. The time that they're spent in school tends to be structured. So I think free play is critical for our kids, and that's part of that social emotional growing too. So then when I'm next door with my neighbor and we have a fallout, I have to figure out, how am I going to go back out and play with that neighbor again, right? In the past, when I was a kid and we had a fallout, my mom would say, and I'd come in and I'd say, Mom, I'm going to run away because my neighbor's mad at me. And my mom would say back to me, well, I'm going to have mashed potatoes at 5 o'clock, so I hope you come home at 5 o'clock to have mashed potatoes. And she wouldn't coddle me and cater to me, and I would go run down to the culvert by the creek, and then I'd show up at 5 o'clock because I wanted mashed potatoes again, right? But in the meantime, I had to figure out, if I wanted to play with that group of friends, how was I going to navigate that after we just had a falling out? My mom didn't, run there and helicopter it. She helped navigate us to have conversations so we could learn.
Yeah, and ultimately that's a skill we have to have every day, right?
Even as adults.
Every day
as adults.
So how do you have a conflict and have it be respectful,
Yep.
and then come back to the table and work with that person?
And I think too, I'm kind of carrying on here, but I think also as adults, our conflict resolution looks differently. I think people tend to bash each other kind of hiddenly on social media, and we're also going to do stuff on social media in the future, but adult conflict is prevalent, just like kid conflict, and adults don't know how to manage it either anymore, because there's so many other ways that we can rub salt in people's wounds through technology, through
and
Snapchat,
almost
through
not
other
let
ways.
anybody else know it.
Well, you're not as transparent
I
about
might
it, for
not
sure.
know it if
Yep.
you're saying it on Facebook and it's really directed at somebody, but I don't know.
It's a little more passive aggressive, for sure. So where our kids tend to be more aggressive because they haven't learned passive aggressive yet, but they will. They will, because we're the models for our kids. So however we interact is what we're teaching our kids.
So here was an interesting fact, and I'm going to read it kind of as it was, so that I can lead us into this idea of the mental health supports in our country. But I was reading an article, and it says, according to the Child Mind Institute, of all the kids diagnosed with mental health, around 70% of them will not actually receive the professional help that they need. And then it goes on to say that about 1.2 million teens die worldwide each year, and that most of those deaths are actually preventable, which I would hope, but let's figure out what they are, right? So it talks about how suicide is the third leading cause of death among adolescents, and that this article really emphasized this need, like a real dire need for mental health supports for our adolescents, and that unfortunately they don't know how to access them. That was a whole lot of words that I mumbled, but either they don't know how to access them, or they're simply not there. And that was one of the things you brought up last time, was that our mental health supports are lacking. So talk more about that.
So first of all, to give you an Iowa statistic, we are third as well. But I would say last year, our Iowa statistic, we had just under 500 suicides in the state of Iowa alone. And that was 2017 data. So we definitely have a problem here in Iowa, and we also have a problem in our surrounding communities. So suicide is an issue. We lack mental health supports. And so what does that really mean, right? Because it's kind of like that whole social emotional word that we keep throwing out there. What does that mean? What does mental health mean?
Right.
And mental health means providing for your own mental well-being, emotionally, spiritually, physically, whichever way you need to do it to be mentally healthy. And so every single person, I believe, could benefit from advancing their mental health in some way, shape, or form. But obviously what we're talking about is we're talking about the individual that is really struggling to cope in society or to cope being healthy in some way. So we live in rural Iowa, where we're talking from right now. So we lack a ton of resources. We are not near, the closest that we would get to a bigger city would be 50 minutes up to Decorah, otherwise an hour and 15 to an hour and a half to Dubuque, Waterloo, or Cedar Rapids, okay? And those aren't even huge communities yet to get some of the services we're talking about. So we don't have the trained professionals that have the right credentials to deal with certain mental health aspects of it. We have lots of phenomenal therapists who have taken additional classes but maybe don't specialize in pediatric or in little child therapy. And when we look at our psychiatrists across the state, the wait list is months and months and months and months out, you know. And when I think about kids that need support now, it's not there. And the funding isn't there, and the schools don't have it. And you know, I hear people say, yeah, but the school has a school counselor or the school has a social worker, and so they can fix all these problems. And that's not really the case at all. I mean, they have a pretty big caseload in themselves, and that's not the role of a school liaison or a school social worker or a school counselor, you know. So we lack resources, we lack funding, and we've got to have more local control about the way we spend our money, and we also have to have more access to people in our backyard, because the other barrier is that people that need mental health services, sometimes even if you can get an appointment, having money to have the gas to get there, having the time off from work to take your child to repeated appointments just doesn't exist for a lot of people.
And navigating the system is
incredibly tough. Incredibly tough. And then figuring out, does insurance pay for it, or Title 19, or whatever benefits you have. It's not clear cut at all. It's not.
So how do we as community members advocate for, you know, you alluded to more people in our backyard, more funding? Is that something where we need to contact local legislation?
Yeah, I mean, we've got to have some statewide movement. I mean, you know, we can piece it out community by community by community, but the reality is, unless things change statewide, legislation, it's got to be. I mean, that's the way that it's going to happen. And we need to have this as a priority. It needs to be a priority, and it's just not. And even after the school shooting part one, what's going to protect our kids, we talked about school shootings and the lack of mental health resources, and we are throwing dollars at being reactive right now. We are taking a lot of time talking about law, policies, school safety plans. But I'm here to tell you that our safety issues are going to go beyond school. Because pretty soon, if we tighten our schools up so tight, either a stranger won't be able to get in, so they're going to pick a different location to do their massacre, or it's a student that's already supposed to be in that school. So we can lock out the world from our kids, but if it's one of our kids that's doing the shooting, we've done nothing. If we haven't given access to mental health supports, and if we haven't spent time really trying to have that sense of belonging with either social emotional curriculum, or making sure that student has a tribe. I mean, when we look at happiness stuff and we look at the research behind gratitude, it gets to the tribe level. I mean, who is your tribe? And we talk about that too. Who is our tribe? Who makes you feel good? Those are the people you need to immerse yourself with. The people that make you feel bad, you need to cut out of your life.
So the last piece that we talked about last time kind of alluded to is this idea of the gaming industry and some regulations that maybe should be in place that aren't, or maybe that we're not aware of. So what have you discovered on that?
Yeah, so globally, according to Newzoo market research, globally, in 2016, there was right under $100 billion worth I mean, that's the
Wow.
worth of the
Of
gaming
the
industry.
industry.
Yep. And in 2017, it was projected to be around $107 billion. So
Wow.
there's a huge market for gaming, right? And I have a couple kids that love gaming. I am for gaming. I am not at all against gaming or technology. I think it's a really awesome tool, and I think it opens door. I mean, look at us. We're on technology now.
Absolutely.
We're on YouTube. We're on, doing a podcast. We're
Yeah.
connecting to those same things that other people are connecting to. So technology and the opportunity to game have done some really awesome things
Right.
for our world. Where I have some problems is when we're starting to talk about first-person shooter games. There is minimal regulation around first-person shooter games, and we know, and I want to tell you now, that I am not at all saying that if you play a first-person
Right.
shooter game, you're going to be a shooter.
Right.
Because that's not what we're saying. It's not a causation, but there's absolutely a correlation. And the correlation that we know is that when we look at our school shootings, for a lot of them, the students were highly engaged in first-person shooter games, and they had lost sense of reality to the real world. Okay, so what's so complicated about this? So when games are sold, they have ratings on them, just like on our DVDs.
Right.
It's G, it's PG, it's R. We all know those, right? But how many parents really know what a rating on a video game is?
Right.
And what's appropriate?
Yeah, I wouldn't have a clue.
So the first one's E, right? So you see an E on a video game. That means everyone. It means that Brindley could play
I might have thought it
gaming.
was explicit,
Oh, okay, yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
that I shouldn't. So E means everyone.
And so then the A, which is adults only, you might have thought was anyone,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I mean,
Absolutely.
and is there a reason why this is so tricky? I don't know. We could get into that conversation, but we
Yeah,
won't.
that's good to know.
Okay, so E is for everyone.
Okay.
E, and then there's a tiny itty bitty little plus 10 that if you need bifocals or you can't see really great, you'd have to really pick it up and look. So the plus 10 means 10 years plus, right? So they think it's best rated for somebody who's 10 years and older.
Okay.
And then there's a T for teen. Okay, I have seen some of the teen, and I would say that I have a 11, going to be 12-year-old. I'd be a little hard pressed to say that some of the teen.
Is teen.
I'd say it's maybe on a little bit bigger teen. Okay. Then you got M. What's M mean?
Moms.
Moms.
I don't know. Mature, because I know what we're talking
Yes,
about. But
it's
I
for
mean,
moms
would you
that are
wonder
mature.
if it was moms?
Yeah, that's great. See, we could take all
could make
these
up all kinds of
letters and
things.
make it up. So
Yeah.
mature is 17 plus.
Okay.
Well, and then you go to A, which I said was anyone, but really it's adults
It's
only.
adults
That's 18. So 17 to 18, you get a year. You get a year to be an M versus 18 to be an A, which is adults only. So I'm
Okay.
curious how many parents know this.
Okay, but so what? Like, I go into the store. If I don't know it, is somebody going to tell me?
Yeah, so of course the gaming industry, which is referred to as, I need to check my little cheat sheet to make sure I get this right, ESRB. It's Entertainment Software Rating Board. So when you read their documentation, they're kind of the gurus around all this gaming. They absolutely say that stores should follow this
Okay.
policy, and they encourage them. But it really, in the end, it depends upon the store, right? So it depends upon how they train their employees and whether or not their employees
Okay.
know enough to
help
ask
me.
or care that your child is buying a game that maybe they need to be older. Okay. So with that being said, so when we're talking about first-person shooter games, we're talking about games that are like buying a hooker and shooting her in the head. I mean, flat out. We're talking about police officers that are being ambushed with a head blowing their head up. We're talking about knives gutting
Right.
out people, and they're fully explicitly showing
Right.
this. I mean, that's the kind of first-person shooter game we're talking about. CommonSenseMedia.org is a parent-friendly website that people can go and look at to see what are games rated. So you have an idea. And what are the things that you are going to see, or the content that you're going to see if you are purchasing that game.
Right. Okay, so I can go to Common Sense Media
CommonSenseMedia.org.
before or
Yep.
after
Yep.
I purchase a game.
Yep. And here's my thing. So, again, I don't want anybody to hear me say, if your child plays a first-person shooter
Correct.
game, they're going to blow up a school. But we do know that there are some very critical times during first-person shooter games while your brain is developing that are more critical.
Right.
We also know that the more hours and the more intense the game is, the more desensitized people come. I mean,
Right.
there's research out there to support that. There's research out there that has looked at your heart rate and how Your heart rate, the very first time you see it, maybe rises to the top, but every time you see it after that, your heart rate slowly goes down. So you're
Right.
desensitized to it. They've looked at blood pressure. I mean, this is scientific stuff they've looked at. This isn't just somebody making this stuff up because they don't like the gaming industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's my third spot that I think we need to do a better job at educating, because not only do we have little kids playing these games, second grade, first grade, but we also have big kids who are playing it pretty intensely, and they have little siblings in the room observing it, or we have parents playing it and their kids are in the room watching it.
Right.
So they're ingesting it the same way.
Right. So to our listeners, our next steps could be, one, just recognizing what social emotional learning is in kids and in adults, and finding those moments where it's an opportunity to teach a lesson or to work with a child through a struggle that's going to better them for the future, instead of sometimes what I do, just getting mad and laying down a consequence.
Yeah.
But really finding my calm.
And it's okay to help other kids.
Yeah.
If you see somebody else's child doing it, call them out in a loving way.
Yeah, right.
Honey, I still love you.
Yeah.
I still care about you. But what you just said was very hurtful.
Let's talk about
And that's
it.
not okay.
Yeah.
Like, teach kids how to have those conversations so it continually grows their character.
Yep. One of the things that I know I just said to my daughter last week, and this goes back to our EQ versus IQ, right? Which is where this all kind of pulls together, was, honey, we've got to get through your emotions. And then when you're done being sad and can control your crying, then let's go talk to your sister.
I half laugh because I'd like to say that to you, and you'd like
I
to say
know.
that to me
Oh,
as
I know.
adults, right? Honey, let's get
Let's
through
get
your
through your
emotions
emotions.
first.
Sometimes I do. Get through it.
Calm down.
Yeah, knock it off. Zip it. Get over it. Pull up those panties and move on. But talking to her about how she's got to get through emotions before she goes and has a conversation.
Yep.
So keep that in mind, that EQ versus IQ, that, every person responds with emotion first. So it's okay to be emotional, to reel that back in, check yourself, and then talk everybody through it. So that's one thing we can be more intentional about. We can be more intentional about what our gaming looks like in our homes and in the homes of our loved ones.
And ask questions if your kids are going other places,
Yeah.
I mean, when you have little kids that you still are giving permission to sleep at other people's house, it's okay to ask the parents, what will they be doing during that time? And here's some things that we don't participate in.
Yeah.
So your kids aren't exposed to these games. Nobody goes out to hurt kids.
No.
It's not like it's intentional.
Right.
So what are you going to be doing with my child while they're there? And then educating your child that, you know what, I can't keep in a bubble forever.
Right.
But here's what I do expect. I have a 5th grade child, and he knows this is what I expect from you. If you're at a house that plays a first-person shooter game, you are not to participate. And this is why.
Right.
Because your brain is growing, buddy, and I need to make sure your brain is filled with lots of good things, not first-person shooter games.
Yeah.
I need to make sure your brain develops healthy. So I think if you justify it why and you explain, kids are willing to understand it. They do.
They do.
Yeah, they
so
do.
ask more questions. Educate yourself. Educate your loved ones. And then thirdly, around this idea of mental health supports would be just to get active, be vocal, ask more questions, see what's available in your community.
And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. If people have diabetes, they're not afraid to say that. Right. If people have a broken arm, we can all see it.
Right.
When we talk about other mental health needs that people have, it's like this taboo word that we don't want to share, we don't want to talk about, we don't want people to judge us, we don't want people to put us in that category. And that's got to stop.
Yeah.
We've got to start supporting each other and saying, let's get the help that you need. And if you need to see a counselor, let's find that one that works for you.
Right.
And if you're currently seeing somebody that you're not jiving with, move on. There are lots of great people out there. Sadly, in our area, it's going to boil down to the location and where you have to drive to get the services that you need. And if you have the funding, because the other thing is it's not cheap. So
we're hopeful that between part 1 and part 2 of how to protect your kids, you've taken some information, some knowledge, some next steps away, and can start to have conversations both reactively, but more importantly, and just as equal, if not more, proactively and more sustainable than some of those reactive approaches. So.
Yeah. So, and I've got an idea that I haven't even talked to Tasha about yet, but I'm thinking our next podcast, last two have been kind of heavy.
Yeah.
I'm thinking we need to talk about something like Everybody Lies.
Yeah.
And get a little controversial here.
Let's
So
do it.
join us on the next one.
Yeah.
We'll bring cheers. We'll bring some beers for cheers. And let's get into a little bit of big data, looking at really big data and what people are really lying about. And you will say, oh my gosh, more than once when we tell you some of the biggest lies out there.
You might want to listen to that one a couple times. I think I've read some of those paragraphs.
You might want to drink
over
while you're
and over. Yeah.
You might want to drink
Get
while
a
you're
drink
listening
and
to it.
join us. So
unless you're driving.
yeah.
So, all right. Well, we're glad you're here with us, cutting through this crazy life. Head on over to iTunes or Stitcher, Google Play. Give us your rating and review. That's what's going to continually make us better. So, until next time, love your simple soul.